The name on the critical condition form was her husband's. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 30, an attending general surgeon at Metro General, and I'm more used to facing blood at 2 a.m. than confessions. The hallway outside the operating room was blindingly bright, the white tile floors reflecting a cold glare. The air smelled of antiseptic mixed with burnt coffee. Sarah, the night nurse, shoved a chart into my hands, her voice low. Got an emergency case waiting on your sign-off. Dr. Cole, it's an MVC with massive internal bleeding. The family's consented to surgery. We just need your signature. I took the chart, spinning a black pen between my thumb and forefinger. My eyes landed on the patient's information section. Under next of kin, it read, Chloe Vance's wife. For a second, it felt like someone had pinched a nerve in the back of my neck. I froze. Chloe Vance. I hadn't heard that name in 3 years. The last time was outside the county courthouse. Chloe had shoved our marriage license back into my hand and said, Ethan, I'm sorry. You can't give me the life I need. Sarah looked up at me, oblivious to what that name meant. Dr. Cole, the family's waiting. His pressure keeps dropping. It's not looking good. I tightened my grip on the pen and closed the chart. Where are they? The consultation room. I was just about to knock when the door to the consultation room was yanked open from the inside. The edge of the door slammed into my forearm, a dull ache shooting up the bone. Before I could say anything, a familiar figure stumbled out into the harsh light. Chloe was clutching a stack of lab reports, looking like she'd been caught in a downpour and then wrung out to dry. Her face was shockingly pale, her eyes terrifyingly red. She ran right into my chest. When she looked up, her lips parted, her voice so hoarse it was on the verge of shattering. Ethan. The word hit me harder than a code blue alarm. I looked down at her, my gaze sweeping from her messy bangs to the crumpled papers in her hand, finally settling on the top sheet. A critical condition notification. The patient's name was listed as Mark Peterson, male, 33. I narrowed my eyes slightly. I'd heard the name before. 2 years ago, the last Facebook post I'd seen from Chloe was a wedding photo with this man. The caption read, Finally found someone to build a real life with. Now that real life was bleeding out of my ER. There were 2 other people in the room. An older man with a mess of white hair sat slumped in a plastic chair, his face in his hands. A younger woman clutched a purse, sobbing too hard to form a coherent sentence. Who's signing the consent forms? I asked, my tone deliberately professional. The older man shot to his feet, his legs unsteady. He grabbed the table to keep from falling. I will. I'm his father. I'll sign. Chloe didn't move. She just gripped that stack of papers, her knuckles white, her eyes locked on me. Sarah spread the forms on the table and handed the pen to Mark's father, patiently explaining the risks. Sir, the patient has significant blood loss. There's a risk of hemorrhage during the procedure, and we can't rule out. The same terms I recited 10 times a day suddenly sounded grating. The father's hand was shaking so badly that the pen just skittered across the paper. Sarah had to steady his hand, helping him sign his name, one shaky letter at a time. After the last signature, the man collapsed back into the chair as if all his strength had been drained. Dr. Cole, please. Save my son. I gave a slight nod. I was used to hearing those words. But today's routine had Chloe stuck in the middle of it. Get him to the ER now. The family can wait here for updates, I said, closing the chart and handing it back to the nurse. Chloe suddenly took a step forward, blocking my path. Ethan. The second time she said my name. Her voice was less shaky now, but more urgent. I looked down at her, tried to keep my expression neutral. Ms. Vance, if you have a question, you can ask. Are you the surgeon? Chloe bit her lip, a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. I am. As the words left my mouth, I saw her shoulders relax for a fraction of a second before tensing up even more. Ethan, you have to save him. Hearing that, a strange chill spread through the palm of my hand. 3 years ago, Chloe had said, Ethan, I don't want a boyfriend who lives in the OR and sleeps in the on-call room, who could collapse over a patient at any moment. I need a future. Now, she was handing me that future and asking me to save it. It's my job. I answered slowly, each word feeling like it was being forced through my teeth. I'll do my best. Chloe's tears finally came. Not for me. For Mark Peterson. I turned and left the room. The air conditioning in the hallway felt a little too strong, a draft sneaking under my collar and making me shiver. The ER team was already prepping. The blue door was propped open, revealing the cold, white light of the surgical lamp inside. I walked in, changed into scrubs, scrubbed my hands, cleaned under my nails, and glanced at the large clock on the wall. 1:43 a.m. Leo, the anesthesiologist, peered over his mask and gave me a nod. Ethan, looks like a belly full of blood. We're hanging units now. Gonna be a long night. I grunted in acknowledgement, pulling my thoughts back from the hallway and focusing on the sterile gloves I was pulling on. Mark Peterson was already on the table, his face half covered by an oxygen mask, tubes running from his body. The monitor beside him traced a frantic, unsteady rhythm. I looked at his face, plain, almost haggard, a world away from the man in the tailored suit I'd seen in Chloe's Facebook photo. "Ready, Dr. Cole," the scrub nurse said, handing me a scalpel. The steel flashed under the light. I reached for it. Just as my fingers touched the handle, there was a soft knock on the door. The sound was quiet, but it cut through the room's hum. Sarah went over and opened the door crack. Chloe was standing outside, looking awkward in a set of oversized visitor scrubs. Her hair was hastily stuffed into a surgical cap, but a few stray strands had escaped. By protocol, family wasn't allowed anywhere near the ER at this point. My brow furrowed. "The family needs to wait outside," I started to say, but Chloe's eyes shot past the nurse and locked onto mine. Through the small window, past the mask and goggles, Chloe's lips moved silently. "Ethan," her voice, muffled by the heavy door, slipped through the cracks between the beeping machines and the hum of the ventilator, finding its mark perfectly. The scalpel lay cool and still in my palm, the metal's chill seeping through my gloves. I looked from the sterile line on the abdomen. I was about to cut to the pair of swollen, red-rimmed eyes in the doorway. "Push another vial of anesthetic," I said, my voice low as I pulled my gaze back to the table. "Let's begin." Two under the surgical lights, for the first time, I hated how steady my hands were. The moment the scalpel made contact, my world shrank to the length of that single incision. The sound of skin parting was faint, yet as precise as slicing open a seam from the past. The abdominal wall, separated layer by layer. Blood welled up, was blotted away by gauze, and then suctioned out. The anesthesia machine hummed steadily. The cardiac monitor beeped, the rhythm a little fast, but still under control. Systolic is 80, heart rate 112. "Leo," the anesthesiologist called out, his voice calm. "Keep going," I said, my eyes fixed on the surgical field. When the abdominal cavity was opened, a wave of heat and a metallic tang of blood rushed out. Under the powerful light, the inside was a disaster. The mesentery was torn, and dark red clots were packed around the intestinal loops. There were multiple bleeding points, the primary source still hidden beneath the chaos. "Suction," I ordered. The scrub nurse handed me the suction tube. The tip met the wound, and blood was pulled away in thick streams, revealing the mangled tissue below. I stared at that mess of flesh and blood for a solid 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, a different image flashed through my mind. Our small walk-up apartment, 5 years ago. I had just started my residency at Metro General. I get off a night shift and ride my beat-up scooter home. A single, dim lamp would be on in the apartment. Chloe would be at the kitchen table, grading papers until her shoulders ached. "Ethan, if you can just always be this steady during surgery, I won't have to worry so much," she'd said once, her chin in her hand, her smile bright. Back then, I thought I had all the time in the world to get better, all the time in the world to give her a future that wasn't a constant struggle. Now that steadiness was being applied to another man's body. "Ethan, looks like a small bowel injury," my resident Chris pointed out. I snapped back to the present, moving the suction tube aside. My forceps followed, gently lifting a loop of the intestine. The injured section was dark, the serosal surface torn, with tiny bleeding points along the edge. "This section has to be resected," I said. "Mark it. We'll reconstruct later." "Got it," Chris replied. Under the surgical lights, everything was reduced to a technical problem. Find the source of the bleeding, suture it. Identify the necrotic tissue, remove it. Assess the risk, inform the family. Emotion was not part of the equation, but my mind wasn't cooperating. With every stitch I placed, Chloe's voice echoed in my head. Ethan, you have to save him. I understood her logic. If Mar Peterson lived, her life could continue on the respectable path someone else had built for her. If he died, she'd be facing widowhood, debt, and the terror of starting over. She didn't want to start over. She'd had that same look on her face when she'd walked away from me. Ethan, I don't want to spend my life waiting for you to get out of surgery, to finish a night shift, to finally have time for me. I want someone who can go pick out a sofa with me at the mall, someone who can drive out to the suburbs on a weekend to look at houses. I don't want to live in a rental anymore. I want to move into our own home. It was raining that night. The streetlight outside our apartment flickered. I stood in the doorway and watched her drag her suitcase down the stairs. The wheels made a crisp, decisive sound on the concrete. I didn't chase after her. I thought she would look back. She never did. Forceps. My voice was suddenly hoarse. The scrub nurse placed a hemostat in my palm. My fingers tightened, clamping off a small, oozing artery. Suture. The thread was in my hand. I tied a clean knot, snipped the end. Bleeding is mostly under control. Leo's voice came from behind me. Pressure's back up to 90. I grunted in response. Once a surgery gets through those first critical minutes, the rest is about patience. Finding every tear, patching every hole. I stitched, one after another, the sensation of the needle passing through tissue transmitted through the forceps to my fingertips. Intensely clear. I used to love that clarity. When I stepped into one, or the world became simple. Black and white. Life and death. Now a gray figure was standing just outside the door. That figure's name was Chloe. Hey, Ethan, is the family outside being difficult? Chris asked in a low voice. I heard the nurse say the wife was a wreck. Quiet, I said without looking up, my tone sharp. Chris shut his mouth. The surgery continued. I repaired the torn intestine, resected a heavily bruised section, performed the anastomosis, and checked the blood supply. It looked good. Let's do one more survey, I instructed. The abdominal cavity was irrigated. The bleeding had stopped. We checked each organ one by one. Time passed silently. The clock on the wall read 3:15 a.m. Ethan, I think we can close, Leo said. He's made it. I took a deep breath, my eyes still on the incision. Give it 2 more minutes. It was a habit of mine. The moment you think you're safe is when things go wrong. For those 2 minutes, I watched the lines on the monitor, listening to the steady beeps, and thought of another EKG. My grandmother's, 3 years ago, in her final moments. I was in surgery that day, too. My phone was on silent. By the time I got out, I had a dozen missed calls from the ICU. I ran, but I was too late. That night, Chloe was furious for the first time. Ethan, how is it that you're always losing the race against your own patients? Aren't I your family, too? Now, here I was, racing to save someone else's family. The monitor was stable. Blood pressure was steady. I nodded. Close him up. As the resident began to close the abdomen, I placed the scalpel back on the tray, stripped off my gloves, and removed my mask. Sweat trickled down from my forehead, running along my brow and stinging my eye. I wiped it away with the back of my hand. The whole procedure took a little over 2 hours. Not long by my standards, but it felt more draining than any other surgery I'd ever performed. Great work, Ethan, Chris said, letting out a breath. Anyone else might have had shaky hands on that one. Next time you get an MVC like this, don't call it an adrenaline rush, I said flatly. It's not funny. Chris scratched his head, silent. Mark Peterson was wheeled out of the OR, first to the recovery room, then to the ICU for observation. I still had to write the post-op report. I stood under the surgical lights, looking down at the empty operating table. My throat felt dry. Dr. Cole, the family outside wants an update, Sarah said, poking her head in. They said they need to hear it from you directly. I knew who she meant. The hallway lights were just as cold as before. I pushed open the door to the surgical wing, and the smell of antiseptic hit me again. The plastic chairs were crammed against the wall. Mark's father sat in the middle, hunched over as if crushed by an invisible weight. Chloe stood beside him, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. When she heard my footsteps, she was the first to look up. Her eyes were filled with fear, but also something more complicated. Dr. Cole, how's my son? The father asked first, his voice raspy. I stopped in front of them, straightening the lapels of my white coat. The surgery went well, I said. For now, he's alive. Mark's father dropped to his knees, grabbing at my pant leg, as if to bow. I quickly stepped aside, leaving him grasping at air. Please, don't do that. I was just doing my job. I was used to that line. What I wasn't used to was Chloe's silence. He'll need to be monitored in the ICU for a few days. There's still a risk of post-op complications, I continued. The nurse will go over the costs and the follow-up plan with you. The father nodded repeatedly, muttering, thank you, over and over. Chloe still hadn't said a word. Once the nurse had helped the father up to go handle the paperwork, the hallway fell quiet, leaving just the two of us. Ethan, Chloe finally said, the third time today. I leaned against the wall and looked at her. If you have something to say, say it, I said, deliberately keeping my tone flat. Chloe hesitated. You just said that he's alive. Yes. Does that mean, she began, her voice trembling slightly, does that mean that if he wakes up, we still have a chance to make our life work? Her eyes were asking a question I was completely unqualified to answer. I looked at her for a long moment before I spoke. Chloe, I said her name. What I just did was stitch together a body that was about to fall apart. Whether or not you can stitch your life back together, I paused, is not within the scope of general surgery. 3 outside the ICU, her respectable life was starting to show its cracks. I was halfway through the post-op report when a dull ache started twisting in my stomach. It was 4 a.m. The wind rattled the window in the on-call room. The old fluorescent light fixture hummed, casting a cold, sterile glow. I finished the last line, signed my name, and realized the joints in my hand were stiff. Just as I was swallowing the last of my cold coffee, my phone rang. Ethan, ICU wants to know if you're coming by to check on the patient, a resident said. He's settled in. Vitals are stable for now. On my way. I hung up, tossed the paper cup in the trash, and walked out of the on-call room without bothering to grab my jacket, the white coat my only layer. The corridor to the ICU always smelled the same. A mixture of antiseptic medication and a faint sourness from sweat, all chilled by the aggressive air conditioning that seemed to blow straight from your scalp to your toes. The digital screen outside the ICU doors flashed. Visiting hours are over. Family is not permitted. Below the screen were the same few plastic chairs. Mark's father was asleep, his head lolled back, so exhausted his eyes wouldn't stay open. He was still clutching a wad of deposit receipts. Chloe wasn't sitting. She was leaning against the wall, her shoulders slumped, arms wrapped around herself as if she were cold, or maybe just trying to hold herself together. She looked up at the sound of my footsteps. The dim light in the hallway wasn't doing her any favors. Her dark circles were stark. Ethan, the 4th time today. The mental tally was pointless, but my brain registered it anyway. The doctor said you were just in there. Chloe asked. I just checked on him. I nodded. He's stable for now. Vitals are holding. When will he wake up? It was a common question with no precise answer. It's different for everyone, I said. Generally, if his vitals remain stable, he could open his eyes within a day or two. Chloe managed a small "oh," then seemed to swallow the sound as if it were rude. Why don't you go get some rest? I said, looking at her pale lips. If you keep this up, you'll be the one getting in 4 drip tomorrow. I'm afraid they'll need me to sign something, she said, glancing at her watch. The sun's not even up yet. This isn't homeroom, I said with a touch of sarcasm. Chloe didn't reply, just rubbed her temples. I took a few steps closer to the glass doors of the ICU. Behind them, Mar Peterson was surrounded by a fortress of machines. The ventilator tube disappeared into his mouth, his chest rising and falling in time with the machine's rhythm. The sounds were muted by the glass, but I'd heard them so many times I could fill them in from memory. Ethan, Chloe said suddenly. Are you on call all night? All night, I confirmed. I was scheduled anyway. Then, she hesitated. If you're here, will you check on him a little more often? She asked it carefully, as if worried I'd misunderstand it as a demand. You think I normally only check once? I countered. That's not what I mean. Chloe sounded flustered. She raised her voice slightly, then remembered where she was and lowered it again. I'm worried something will happen when I'm not here, and no one will notice. This is an intensive care unit, not a bus station, I said, leaning against the wall. Each patient has at least 3 sets of eyes on them at all times. You don't have to carry the entire weight of this on your shoulders. Chloe was quiet for a moment. I'm used to it, she said finally. When she said those 3 words, Her expression wasn't one of self-pity, but of pure exhaustion. Used to what? Used to being the last line of defense, she said with a dry, humorless smile. Otherwise, I feel like I'm constantly on the edge of a panic attack. I wasn't comfortable with this kind of conversation. I was comfortable with medical terms, with blood pressure readings that signaled danger. Emotions didn't have a measurable scale, but I knew she wasn't exaggerating. Back when I was a resident, working nonstop, Chloe used to be the same way. She would wait for me in the hospital corridors with her laptop, grading papers and lesson plans on her knees. If she missed the last bus, she'd take the night bus. Back then, I thought it was a blessing to have someone willing to wait for you in a place so cold it seeped into your bones. Only later did I realize that for some people, it wasn't a choice. It was a survival instinct. I thought you married a respectable life, I said suddenly, the words sounding harsher than I intended. Chloe's shoulders visibly tensed. I did, she nodded. A respectable life. Coming from her, the words sounded colder than the antiseptic in the air. So, is camping out in front of the ICU part of that respectable life? I pressed. Chloe didn't argue. She hugged her purse tighter. The zipper was partially open, revealing a crumpled wallet and 2 worn-looking bank cards. His parents are at home with our son, Chloe said slowly. They're older and not in the best health. When the accident happened, I was in the middle of making soup for him. I got the call and ran out of the house without even turning off the stove. When she said the word son, her face softened for an instant before the tension returned. Mark was out with clients before the crash, she said, her lips tightening. He's been working on a big project, coming home late every night. Didn't you say he could give you the life you needed? The memory of her words at the courthouse felt uncomfortably fresh. He did, Chloe said with a slight, bitter smile. We got the house. The mortgage payments are on time. There's a car in the garage. The security guard at our gated community knows us by name. I quit my tutoring job and took a position at a private elementary school. The pay is stable, and I get more time off during the summer and winter breaks. It did sound a lot more respectable than our 300-square-foot walk-up. Then why do you look more tired than you ever did back then? I asked. Chloe didn't answer right away. She fumbled in her purse and pulled out a portable charger, along with a stack of crumpled insurance cards and medical records. This accident is going to cost a lot, she said, almost to herself. His parents' retirement income is modest, and our mortgage is already a huge strain. He told me his annual bonus was coming through this month. He was going to buy me a nicer ring, but he never made it home. The car did. I looked away from the pile of cards. Are you afraid that if he dies, your respectable life will die with him? The words came out blunt and cruel. I'm afraid that if he dies, I'll have to learn how to be poor again, Chloe said, looking at me with a sort of brutal honesty. I'm not a brave person. I thought I was brave back in that little apartment. Her voice grew softer. But then I realized I was just young. The words, I was just young, felt like a delayed knife thrust, landing right between us. I looked at Chloe, unsure of what to say. Ethan, she said my name again. Why didn't you come after me that night? The question came without warning. The hallway light flickered once, then came back on, as if a circuit had been momentarily shorted. I knew which night she meant. The night we broke up. She was dragging her suitcase through the rain, calling an Uber, telling me she was sorry, asking me where our future was. I thought you were looking for an answer, not a person, I said, my voice steady. And I didn't have one to give you. You do now, Chloe said, looking up, her tone strange. You're an attending surgeon now. Attending surgeons still can't afford a 3-bedroom in the city center, I said coldly. Chloe let out a shaky laugh. Ethan, she said. You know, at the scene of the accident, they called me. Not anyone else. But when it came time for Mark to list an emergency contact, the name he wrote down was his boss's. She said in a flat, even tone. Behind the ICU doors, the monitors glowed with a faint green light. It was only then that I truly understood that sometimes respectable is just a word for Facebook posts and contracts. When things go wrong, the only thing that matters is whose name is on the first line. What about you? I asked. Who's your emergency contact now? His name is on our son's birth certificate, Chloe said, looking at the glass door. My parents are the emergency contacts on my phone. She paused. And you're still one of them. I didn't know how to respond to that. You never changed it? I frowned. I forgot, Chloe said. By the time I remembered, I couldn't be bothered to change it. Besides, with your job, it's not like you were ever going to change your number. The excuse was flimsy at best, but I knew that sometimes couldn't be bothered had nothing to do with being lazy. Chloe, I said slowly, you came to me because you needed me to save your husband, not to rehash the past. Bringing up old history won't get you a discount on your hospital bill, and it won't get him an extra 4-line. I was deliberately cold. Chloe was silent for a moment, then nodded. I know. She wiped her eyes quickly, as if she didn't want me to see. Don't worry, Ethan, she said, taking a deep breath. I won't make this difficult for you. Just do what you do best. And whatever comes next, whatever karma I have coming, let it come. Karma? I raised an eyebrow. You think this is karma? I used to brag to people my boyfriend saves lives for a living. His own life is incredibly valuable. And now, here I am, begging you to save my husband. Chloe looked at me. Doesn't that sound a lot like karma? I didn't answer. From the other end of the hall, I heard the sound of footsteps. An ICU nurse was coming out with a card. You should go home and get some rest, the nurse said. We have to turn and suction the patient in about half an hour. You won't be able to see him anyway. Mark's father woke with a start. He mumbled a few questions about his son's condition and was eventually persuaded to go to the cafeteria for a cup of coffee. Finally, it was just me and Chloe again. You should go home too, I said. If you collapse, you just take up one of our beds. I'm not staying. Chloe shook her head. I'm going home to take a shower, change my clothes, drop my son off at daycare, and then I'll be back. She paused, her voice dropping lower. Ethan, will you still be here today? I will, I said, unless someone gets into a worse car accident than your husband. Chloe didn't smile. She just looked at me, her expression too complicated for me to decipher. Then she said softly, after I drop my son off, I'll be back to wait. You save his life in there, and I'll be out here trying to figure out how much of my own life I still have any say over. With that, she turned and walked away. The automatic doors at the end of the hall slid shut, cutting her slender figure in two. I stood in front of the ICU, my hands shoved in the pockets of my white coat. My fingertips brushed against something hard. It was the pen I had used to sign the chart. There was still a trace of blue ink on the tip, not yet dry. I suddenly realized that from the moment she had called my name, this was never just another surgery. For during morning rounds, I heard his mother say he never should have married you in the first place. At 8 in the morning, the hospital ward was once again bustling with noise. The day shift nurses, having finished their handoff reports, pushed medication carts from room to room, the wheels making a crisp, steady rhythm on the linoleum floor. When I emerged from the on-call room, my white coat was as wrinkled as if it had just been pulled from a washing machine. I'd gotten less than 2 hours of sleep, and my brain felt like it had been split in two. One half was still in the operating room, while the other was being forced to follow the morning's rounds. Dr. Cole, the lab results from the ICU just came in, a medical student said, rushing up to me with a stack of papers. Mr. Peterson's numbers are looking good. His lactate levels are down. I glanced at the report. Inform the family they can have a 5-minute visit around 10 o'clock, I said, and emphasized that it's a visit, not a family meeting at his bedside. Got it, the student scribbled in his notepad. I continued my rounds on the main surgical floor. The post-op appendectomy was recovering well. The gallbladder removal patient was sitting up in bed, scrolling through his phone and complaining about the hospital breakfast. These complaints, along with stable vital signs, were the reassuring background noise of a typical morning. As I reached the end of the hallway, I heard a different kind of sound. Sharper than a complaint, more muffled than a cry. It sounded like a low, intense argument, the kind people have in a hospital when they're trying not to shout. The sound was coming from the family waiting area. I told you, he never should have married you in the first place. It was a woman's voice, older, but with an edge as sharp as a freshly honed scalpel. I paused. The med student followed my gaze and whispered, I think that's Mr. Peterson's family. The waiting area was furnished with a few old sofas, the leather on the armrests cracked and peeling, revealing bits of stuffing. Chloe was perched on the edge of a chair, her back ramrod straight, her hands resting primly on her knees, looking like a student being reprimanded by the principal. Mark's mother stood opposite her, arms crossed, her face pale with anger. Mark's father sat beside them, his eyes red and swollen, not saying a word. Mom, I've already explained. Chloe's voice was low. That intersection is notoriously dangerous. Mark had been drinking, and he insisted on driving himself home. He was drinking, and you couldn't stop him? His mother shot back, slapping the arm of the chair. What kind of wife are you? Mom, I was putting our son to bed, Chloe said, her lips tightening. Mark said he was just having a quick dinner with a client. By the time he was heading back, it was all ready. So you couldn't have gone to pick him up? His mother pressed. My son is out there killing himself to provide for this family. And you're at home, acting like a queen because you're looking after one child? The other families in the waiting area shifted uncomfortably, trying to create distance. No one intervened. A family argument is a spectacle best watched from the cheap seats. Mom, I'm not a queen, Chloe said, lifting her head. I have a job. And what does your little salary cover? His mother sneered. If it weren't for my son working himself to the bone all these years, do you think you'd be living in that neighborhood? You're just enjoying the fruits of his labor. Chloe was silent for a moment. Mom, I contribute to the mortgage, she said, her voice tight. We agreed before we got married. Half of my salary goes directly into the mortgage account. But the deed is in my son's name, his mother countered instantly. The agreement was that he would buy the house, and you would buy the furniture. If we had to sell that house now, the bank would take most of it, and what's left would belong to the Peterson family. If you really cared about him, you'd be trying to figure out how to pay for his medical bills instead of making useless excuses. I heard every word clearly. The med student beside me swallowed nervously. Dr. Cole, should we maybe go to the ICU now? He asked tentatively. I could have turned around. Their family drama wasn't my problem. My responsibility was limited to charts, lab results, and vital signs, not who paid for what in their household. But I took a few steps forward. Mrs. Peterson, I said. Startled, she turned. Seeing my white coat, she forced her expression to soften slightly. Dr. Cole, Mark's father said, quickly getting to his feet, his voice almost pleading. Good morning. Your son's vitals are good, I said. The most important thing right now is getting him through the next few days. Regarding the medical expenses, the hospital has financial aid programs and payment plans we can help you apply for. I paused and glanced at Chloe. But for now, who pays is less important than ensuring his treatment continues without interruption. A flicker of something, calculation, perhaps, crossed the mother's eyes. Dr. Cole, you don't understand. We're not a wealthy family, she said, her tone shifting to one of hardship. My husband's pension isn't much. I'm not in good health, and my son works so hard for every penny. Right before the accident, he had just taken out his annual bonus. He was going to buy her a new ring. When she said her, she shot a quick, venomous glance at Chloe. The ring never appeared, and now we don't know where the money went. Chloe looked up, her face paling. Mom, the bonus was just deposited yesterday. He said he needed to pay off the credit card first. I haven't touched it. You say you haven't touched it, and we're supposed to believe you. The mother sneered. Your family can't contribute anything. I wouldn't be surprised if you were already planning how to spend that money. I had no intention of listening to this family court session any longer. Mrs. Peterson, I said, my voice a little lower, a little firmer. I was in the operating room when your son was brought in. Before the surgery, the initial deposit was insufficient. I have records of who swiped their card first and who signed the consent forms. If you can't recall, I can have the nurse make you copies of the paperwork. Mrs. Peterson froze. So did her husband. Chloe kept her head down, her fingers absently twisting the seam of her pants. I understand that you're scared, I continued. Anyone in this situation would be. But don't waste the energy you should be directing at the drunk driver on your own family. It's not good for the patient's recovery, either. My tone wasn't harsh, but it left no room for argument. Mrs. Peterson was silenced. Dr. Cole is right, her husband said, finally speaking up. Honey, stop taking it out on the girl. Nobody wanted this to happen. Please, I'm begging you as a father. Let's not fight in the hospital. His wife shot him a glare and huffed, but she didn't say anything else. The fragile peace was restored. I turned to Chloe. Have you eaten breakfast? I asked. She shook her head. Go to the cafeteria and get something warm, I said. Visiting hours are at 10 for 5 minutes. If you pass out in front of the ICU, we'll have to waste resources getting you a bed. It sounded impersonal, a line I'd delivered 100 times before. Chloe bit her lip, as if forcing herself to comply. "I'll go get something," she said, standing up. She turned to her father-in-law. "Dad, could you please keep an eye on things? Call me if anything changes." He nodded. "Be safe," he added. Chloe picked up her bag. As she passed me, she hesitated. She leaned in and whispered, "Thank you." This thank you wasn't just for saving a life. It was for deflecting some of the fire. I didn't say, "You're welcome." "Go eat," was all I said. Chloe stepped into the elevator, and the doors slid shut. In the final closing gap, her downcast profile looked utterly exhausted. The med student waited until the doors were closed before whispering, "The pressure on families is intense. You need to learn when to keep your mouth shut." I glanced at him. "Say that in front of the wrong family, and you'll get punched." He nodded quickly. "But Dr. Cole, what you said back there, that was really kind," he added quietly. "I was just reminding her not to take up a hospital bed." I said, my face impassive. Kindness is not in my job description. My mouth said one thing, but my stomach chose that moment to twist in protest. I thought of the cold coffee I'd had during the night and the empty feeling in my gut. "Let's go to the ICU," I said. A new visiting schedule was taped to the ICU door, the red font stark against the white paper. Nurses moved in and out, changing 4 bags, suctioning patients, turning them. Mar Peterson was in the second row of beds, the ventilator tube still in place, his chest rising and falling with the machine's rhythm. The EKG showed a regular waveform, and his oxygen saturation was stable. "Dr. Cole, no major issues overnight," the on-call doctor told me. "His pressure dipped a few times, so we gave him some fluids. We've adjusted his parameters." "Pupils?" I asked. "Reactive to light," the doctor replied. "He responds to stimuli, but no spontaneous eye-opening yet." I nodded and stepped closer, glancing at the items on his bedside table. A half-empty bottle of water, an old smartphone, and a crumpled surgical consent form. The phone was face down, and on the back was a small, faded family photo sticker. It showed Mark, Chloe, and a little boy, maybe 3 or 4 years old. The child was grinning, revealing a mouthful of baby teeth. Chloe was leaning down, holding him, but her gaze was directed somewhere just beyond the camera. Only Mark was looking directly at the lens. His smile wasn't genuine. It looked forced, as if for the sake of the picture. "The family can visit at 10, I said. "Yes, doctor," a nurse noted. I tore my gaze away from the sticker and turned to leave. Just as I reached the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an unknown number. I answered. "Hello, is this a member of Mr. Mark Peterson's family?" A young woman's voice asked, professionally polite. "I'm his colleague from work. Last night I'm not his family," I interrupted. "Oh, then you are." "I'm his surgeon," I said. "If you have something to discuss, you should contact his family first." There was a pause on the other end, clearly unprepared for that response. "Oh, Dr. Cole, hello. Our manager just heard about Mark's accident and asked me to check on his condition," she said, recovering quickly. "Is it serious? We have a project that really depends on him." "A project? Work?" The first call after a near-fatal accident came from his company, not his family. "He just had major surgery and is currently in the ICU. I stated plainly. "You should prepare for him to be out of work for a significant amount of time." "What?" She sounded shocked. "But the project bid is next week. If your company believes the project is more important than his life, you can have your manager come and talk to me," I said, my tone flat. "But he'll have to wait in line. My clinic schedule is already fully booked today." No, doctor, please don't misunderstand," she said, her voice rising in panic. "Of course, the patient's health comes first. Of course. Then that's all," I said and hung up. The phone screen lit up, then went dark. I stood in front of the glass ICU door for a few seconds. My reflection stared back at me. A white coat, dark circles under my eyes, and a weariness that a single night's shift couldn't account for. At 10 o'clock, I stood by the door as the family prepared for the visit, putting on caps, masks, and shoe covers. Chloe had returned, wearing a clean beige sweater instead of yesterday's wrinkled jacket. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wasn't wearing any makeup, but her eyes seemed a little brighter than the day before. "When you go in, do not touch the patient," I recited the rules. "Do not touch any of the equipment. Do not speak loudly. You can look, but try not to get too emotional," I added. "If you can't control it, stand back from the bed. Chloe nodded. The ICU door slid open a crack, and a gust of cold, sterile air blew out. Just before she stepped inside, she turned back to me. "Ethan, the fifth time. Did you just get a call from his work?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "How did you know?" "Mark's colleague texted me," Chloe said with a bitter smile. She asked me how his salary would be calculated if he was out for a month. For a second, I almost told her to call you directly. I didn't respond to her half-hearted joke. I just looked at her. "Go on in," I said. "You only have 5 minutes." "Okay." She walked inside. The glass door slid shut, separating her from the bed and the machines, blurring her into the stark white of the room. I glanced at my watch. 5 minutes. For someone just pulled back from the brink of death, 5 minutes is laughably short. For marriage held together by the pretense of being respectable, it might be just enough time for more cracks to appear. 5 when he woke up, his first words were about the project, not her. My afternoon clinic was as chaotic as ever. The moment the door opened, patients surged in, abdominal pain, acid reflux, hypochondria, forming a long line dictated by appointment numbers. I moved robotically, taking histories, ordering tests, and advising on diets. My 12th patient, a man in his 50s, lifted a shirt to show me an old surgical scar, complaining of a dull ache. As I was writing his chart, my phone vibrated in my pocket. "Dr. Cole, I see you on the line for you," the clinic nurse said, poking her head in. I put my pen down. "Have the next patient wait a minute." On the phone, the ICU doctor sounded cautiously optimistic. "Dr. Cole, we've started weaning Mr. Peterson off the sedation as planned. He just had spontaneous eye-opening and is responding to simple commands. His respiratory stats look good, so we're considering extubation this afternoon." "How long has he been responsive?" I asked. "About 10 minutes, he said, checking the records. He can squeeze a hand, nod his head. I'm on my way." Outside my office, patients were still waiting restlessly. The nurse explained the delay, and a few grumbled, but their complaints were quickly absorbed by the hospital's general cacophony. As I walked to the ICU, my mind wasn't quiet. This was good news. For someone who had survived a major trauma and massive blood loss, waking up less than 24 hours after surgery was a good sign. But all I could think about was Chloe, who had stood vigil outside the ICU all night. If life were fair, she should have been the first to hear this. When I arrived, I glanced at the plastic chairs. Chloe wasn't there. Her father-in-law was hunched over his phone, muttering about who to call next. Her mother-in-law sat stiffly, holding a thermos, her expression sour. "Where is she?" I asked. "Chloe went to pick up our grandson from school," the father said, jumping to his feet. "The teacher called. The little guy keeps asking why his daddy hasn't come to get him, so she had to go. She said she'd be right back." I nodded. "Mr. Peterson is starting to regain consciousness," I told them. "After we remove the breathing tube, we'll let you see him one at a time." The father's eyes immediately filled with tears. "He's really awake?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Dr. Cole, you're a miracle worker. He's not fully awake, just conscious," I clarified, always careful with my words. "We still need to monitor for infection and any pulmonary complications. Don't get your hopes up too high just yet." With that, I pushed through the ICU doors. A group of nurses was gathered around Mark Peterson's bed. The ventilator was on a low setting, its hissing sound much softer than before. Mark's eyes were slightly open, his gaze drifting slowly as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. "Mr. Peterson, can you look at me?" I said, leaning over him. "I'm a doctor who performed your surgery yesterday." His eyes struggled to focus on me. After a moment, he managed a slight nod. "We're going to take the tube out of your throat now," I continued. "It will be uncomfortable, but I need you to work with us. Nod again if you understand." He nodded again, the movement a little more certain this time. "Okay, let's do it," I said to the nurses. Extubation is a precise process. Suction the airway, have the patient cough to clear any remaining secretions, and then smoothly withdraw the tube. Every step is unpleasant for the patient, especially one who has spent the night fighting for his life. As the nurse suctioned his airway, Mark's brow furrowed, and a muffled groan escaped his throat. "Take a deep breath," I instructed. "Now a strong cough." He complied. As the tube came out, his eyes flew open, and his chest heaved violently like someone who had just been dragged from underwater. A respiratory therapist quickly placed an oxygen mask over his face. "It will be a little hard to breathe at first," I said. "Take it slow." Mark gasped for air. After about a minute, his breathing began to even out. I glanced at the monitor. Oxygen saturation was at 97%, heart rate a little fast, but acceptable. "Can you speak?" I asked. His throat was raw. The sound he made was like sandpaper on metal. "Water," he rasped. "You can't drink yet," I said. "We'll wet your lips." A nurse used a swab to moisten his mouth. Mark took another breath, his gaze becoming clearer. By custom, newly awakened patients usually ask one of few standard questions. "Where am I? Am I going to die?" Some ask for family, others ask for the time. I've seen countless faces pulled back from the brink of death, and each has its own first words. "Mr. Peterson," I said, looking at him intently, "do you know what happened to you?" He looked at me for a few seconds, his atoms apple bobbing. Then he spoke. "The bid." His voice was barely a whisper, but the word was clear. "Did we win the bid?" I froze. So did the resident next to me. "What did you say?" I asked, making sure I'd heard him correctly. "The project." Mark struggled to take a breath. "The bid." He tried to lift his hand, but the foreline held him back. His eyes were filled with an anxiety that had nothing to do with his own mortality. "Mr. Peterson, you were in the intensive care unit," I said, keeping my tone level. "You were in a car accident yesterday. You had major surgery. Forget about the project for now. Your only job is to stay alive." He frowned, his lips moving, forming a series of jumbled sounds. I could make out a few keywords: proposal, manager, bonus. He was trying to ask if his boss would give the project to someone else, if he would still get his bonus. I had no interest in translating for him. "Rest now," I said, pressing the call button. "If you cooperate with your treatment, you'll have plenty of other projects to work yourself to death on in the future. If you worry about this now, all you'll end up with is a tombstone." Mark stared at me, a look of confusion on his face, as if he was only just realizing he wasn't in a conference room. "Family," he managed to say. "Your family's outside," I said. "We'll let them in to see you shortly." His expression softened slightly. He started to say, but a coughing fit cut him off. A thin layer of fog clouded his oxygen mask. I didn't give him another chance to speak. It's never a good idea to let a newly extubated patient talk too much. "Let's leave him be," I told the nurse. "Monitor his breathing and blood pressure closely. Call me if anything changes." As I left the ICU, Mark's father rushed toward me. "Dr. Cole, is he awake?" he asked, clutching my sleeve. "He's conscious, and the tube is out," I said. "He's doing well for now. If his vitals remain stable, we'll continue to reduce the sedation." "Does that mean he's out of danger?" the father asked. "I can't make any absolute promises," I said, falling back on my standard line. "But he's in a much better place than he was yesterday." The father nodded repeatedly, muttering thanks to some unseen deity. "You can see him in 10 minutes, I added. "2 at a time." "My wife and I will go in," he said immediately. His wife, still holding the thermos, narrowed her eyes. "His wife isn't even back yet," she said. "Her son has school. She can come whenever she wants." I didn't respond to that. "A nurse will come get you," I said, and walked back toward my office. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. A text message. The contact was saved as a single letter. "See, I'm on the subway. Just picked up our son. On my way back." A second message followed. "Is he awake?" I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed a reply. "Tube's out. He can talk." The response took a full minute. "What did he say?" she asked. I thought for a moment. He asked about the project bid. An even longer pause. The message indicator showed she was typing, then stopped, then started again. It was as if she was writing and deleting her real thoughts over and over. Finally, a deceptively simple message appeared. "As long as he can talk, I feel a little better." I looked at the message, but I didn't reply. Better? Knowing that the first thing on your husband's mind after nearly dying wasn't you, or your child, but a project bid? If she felt better, it was either because she had a heart of stone, or because she was already used to it. Around 1 o'clock, I was finishing a bowl of bland cafeteria noodle soup when the ICU called again. Chloe was back, a small bag in her hand, probably food for her in-laws. There was a light sheen of sweat on her forehead, as if she had run all the way from the subway. "Ethan," she said when she saw me. I'd lost count of how many times she'd said my name. "How is he?" she asked. "Better than yesterday," I said. "You and his mother can go in together." "Can only one of us go?" she asked. "Two at a time is the maximum," I clarified. "Then you should go in with his dad," Chloe said immediately. "I'll wait out here." "Are you sure?" I looked at her. Most people wait for this moment more anxiously than the birth of their own child. "I'm afraid." Chloe's fingers tightened around the bag. "I'm afraid I'll lose control." She took a deep breath. "Let his parents go first," she said. "I'll go in after they come out." She sounded more like a dutiful daughter than a wife. Mark's mother, probably feeling like she had to go in, grumbled, "Fine, his father and I will go first." The ICU doors opened and closed. Through the glass, I could only see their backs. I instinctively shifted to the side, leaving a space for Chloe. She didn't take it. She found a chair and sat down, placing the bag at her feet and staring at her shoes, as if watching a story that had nothing to do with her. 10 minutes felt like an eternity in an instant. When the doors opened again, Mark's mother's eyes were red. "He recognized me," she said to me. "He asked if he was dreaming." Chloe stood up, her gaze fixed on the door. "You can go in," I said. She nodded. "Dr. Cole," she started, then stopped. "If I say the wrong thing in there, please don't take it personally." "If you manage to say the wrong thing in an ICU, you've got more nerve than I do with a scalpel," I said coldly. She managed a faint smile and walked in. The glass door slid shut, enclosing her in that world of cold, white light. This time, I didn't look away. I watched her walk to the bedside, lean over, and speak. I saw Mark's tired eyes lift to meet hers. I couldn't read their lips, but I could guess the script. "You scare me to death," she would say. "Does it hurt? Is there anything you need?" Mark might say, "I'm okay," or "My throat hurts," or maybe he'd ask about his mother. I had a few versions of their dialogue playing in my head, but reality, once again, proved my imagination inadequate. 10 minutes later, Chloe walked out. Her eyes weren't swollen from crying. They weren't even red. Her face was just pale, as if a layer of color had been erased. "Did you talk to him?" I asked. "We talked," she nodded. "What did he say?" "He said." Chloe paused, her lips curving into a smile that died halfway. "He told me to call his manager. He said to tell him this was an off-the-clock accident, not his own fault. He said he still has another project in the pipeline, and he doesn't want to be replaced." I was silent. "After that, he asked me how badly the car was damaged," Chloe continued. "He said the car is on a loan, and if the insurance doesn't cover it, our monthly payments will be even tighter." She spoke in a flat, even tone. "Finally, he asked me, 'Did you take time off work?' I said yes. And he said, 'You should go back this afternoon. You can't help much here anyway.'" "Is that all?" I asked. "That's all," Chloe said. "He didn't ask about your son?" I pressed. "He did," she nodded. "He asked one thing. He said, 'Keep an eye on him for me. Don't let him get too rowdy, or his teachers will think we don't discipline him.'" It sounded like he was discussing a weekend chore, not something you say after cheating death. "And then," I asked. "And then the nurse said time was up," Chloe said, taking a breath. "So I came out." The hallway fell silent. Even the sound of a passing cart seemed muffled. "Ethan," Chloe said suddenly, "do you think?" What he said was normal. From a medical perspective, I'm not qualified to judge whether a patient's words are normal, I said. As long as he's lucid and responsive, he meets the criteria for being conscious. "And from your own perspective?" she asked. "My own perspective is limited to determining whether someone needs a critical condition form," I said dryly. "I don't write progress notes for a marriage." She looked at me, and for a second, the exhaustion in her eyes cracked open. "Ethan," she said, "do you have any idea how many different conversations I rehearsed in my head before he woke up?" I told myself that if his first question was whether I was okay, I would forgive all of his past coldness. If his first question was about how much we owed the hospital, I would help him pay it back, no matter what. If his first words were "I'm sorry," I would write off all the fear from yesterday as a bad dream. But he asked about the project. She smiled, a fragile expression that looked like it might shatter. Suddenly, I don't even feel like blaming him. He's always been this person. It's just that before, I was looking at him through a filter I created myself. I said nothing. She reached into her purse and pulled out a card. A plain, ordinary bank card, the surface worn smooth. This is the money I've saved on my own over the last few years, Chloe said, holding the card between her fingers. I was planning to use it next year to get our son into a better school district. I guess I'll use it to pay the medical bills for now. She looked up at the cold, impersonal sign above the ICU. You said it doesn't matter who pays. What matters is that the treatment continues. I believe you. She held the card out to me, a clumsy, instinctive gesture. I can't take this, I said. I'm not the billing department. Right? I'll just take it to the cashier's window. She pulled her hand back, her fingers trembling slightly. Ethan, she said my name again. I've realized something, she said. It feels like my entire life has been spent on someone else. First, it was waiting up all night for you to finish surgery. Then, it was having his child and paying his mortgage. Now it's paying his medical bills. If I'm ever the one to collapse, I probably won't even get one of these plastic chairs outside the ICU to sit in. The words weren't heavy, but they landed with a thud. I wanted to say something sarcastic to break the tension. Something like, well, you're still standing now, aren't you? But the words never left my mouth. When do you get off work? She asked suddenly. 7 tonight. Then, she glanced at the time. I'm going to go home for a bit, transfer the money from my savings, and pay the first installment. I'll figure out the rest later. She paused. I haven't told my parents the truth yet. They're not in good health. I don't want to worry them. I just told them he was overworked and needed to be hospitalized for a few days. That's what you call misrepresenting the facts, I said flatly. I have no choice, Chloe shrugged. These days, even my breakdowns have to be scheduled. With that, she picked up the small bag, handed the food to her father-in-law, told him to eat it while it was hot, and walked toward the elevator. The doors closed, once again swallowing her slender figure. I stood in front of the ICU, my fingers absently tracing the contents of my white coat pocket. The duty roster, a pen, and a small, folded piece of paper. It was a word I had jotted down yesterday. Respectable. I crumpled the paper in my fist. It made a faint, crackling sound. That word, when applied to Chloe, was starting to take on a new meaning. Not something given to her by someone else or something curated for a Facebook post, but something she might, one day, finally claim for herself. 6 at the billing window, she looked like she was sentencing herself to life. At 6 in the evening, the line at the hospital's billing office was growing again. Behind the glass, the brightly lit signs for cash, insurance, and self-service were almost painfully sharp. I was only there to sign off on a consultation form. A patient co-managed by general surgery and cardiology had a family who insisted my right condition is currently stable one more time on the chart. After signing, I stuck the pen back in my pocket. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of a familiar figure at the billing window. Chloe was standing in the middle of the line, clutching a stack of invoices, her shoulders tensed. The screen in front of her was glowing. I couldn't see the numbers, but I could see the red of the total amount reflecting in the glass. I glanced over, then told myself it was none of my business. Countless people lined up at this window every day, swiping cards, handing over cash, staring at pieces of paper that dictated their financial futures. I couldn't stop for every one of them. When it was Chloe's turn, the clerk took her invoices. Initial deposit is $15,000. Card or cash? Card, Chloe said, handing it over. Her movements were practiced, as if she had already mentally prepared for this blow. The machine beeped once, then twice. Payment failed. The clerk said, looking up. Try again. Chloe took a deep breath and tapped the card again. Another beep. This time, even I could hear the cold, mechanical indifference in the word failed. Ma'am, there are insufficient funds on this card. The clerk said, her patience wearing thin. Do you have another one? Behind Chloe, the line shuffled restlessly. Someone rustled their papers. Someone else muttered. What's the hold up? Okay, Chloe said, taking her card back. She fumbled in her purse for another one, her movements becoming flustered. She swiped the second card. The machine beeped again. Still not enough. The clerk's tone was colder now. Why don't you go use the self-service kiosk to check your balance instead of holding up the line? The blue light from the nearby kiosk illuminated Chloe's face, making her lips look even paler. She stood frozen for a moment, as if her brain was catching up. Sorry, she said, gathering her papers and stepping aside. Her father-in-law, still holding the now empty thermos from the morning, had clearly heard the exchange. "What's wrong?" he asked tentatively. "Is the money not enough?" "It's fine," Chloe said, forcing a smile. "I probably have some funds in a fixed-term account that haven't been transferred yet. I'll just check." She walked to the self-service machine, inserted her card, and entered her PIN. A string of numbers appeared on the screen. The balance was far less than she had expected. Even from a distance, I saw her shoulders slump. "How can that be?" she whispered to herself. "I just transferred the money from my investment account yesterday." She navigated to the transaction history. A long list of debits scrolled down the screen. A few were labeled educational expenses from a tutoring center. One was the monthly mortgage payment, and another, dated at 11:58 p.m. the previous night, was an automatic insurance premium payment. The system had completed its task with cold efficiency, just moments after the accident that had upended her life. The money had been spent where it was supposed to be spent. It just wasn't the money she needed right now. "Chloe," her father-in-law called. "If I had saved for just 6 more months, I would have had enough for our son's tuition," she murmured. "And now?" She pulled out the card and inserted another. That one had even less. The combined balance of all her cards was just enough to cover this initial deposit, but it would wipe out every emergency fund she had. She tapped a few numbers into her phone's calculator, paused, then deleted them. "I'll pay it," she said, and walked back to the window. I watched as she swiped card after card, piecing together the total amount in fragmented payments. When the final transaction went through, the clerk handed her a thick stack of receipts. "This is the inpatient deposit, this is the prepayment for treatment, and this is for out-of-pocket medication costs," the clerk said, her tone businesslike. "And just so you know, if he needs any major procedures in the ICU, this amount won't last long." Chloe nodded, like a student taking notes. The hand that took the receipts was trembling more than mine did during surgery. "Thank you," she said quietly. The line moved forward. The hospital system never paused for one person's crisis. I could have walked away. My work was done, but my feet felt nailed to the floor. I walked over to her. "Chloe." She turned, her body tensing instinctively. "Ethan." Her voice was tired but composed. "Did you pay the deposit?" I asked. "Yes," she said, holding up the receipts. "This much for now. I'll figure out the rest later." "What's the plan?" I asked bluntly. "What else can I do?" she said with a bitter smile. "Borrow from friends or the bank. If I have to, I'll just postpone the fund I was saving for our son." She spread the receipts out, her finger tracing the numbers. "I learned something today. The cost of pulling someone back from a car wreck, just for a few days in the ICU, can wipe out a family savings for years. And that's not even counting the rehab." "Is this the first time you're realizing that?" I asked. "I thought I knew. Back when I used to wait for you at the hospital," she said, glancing at me. "You were always working late, and I'd hear families in the hallway arguing over money. I felt for them. But back then, it was just a story about someone else. Now that it's happening to me, I finally understand what it feels like to have a knife in your chest, and you have to hold it in place yourself to stop the bleeding." The analogy was fitting. I thought for a moment, but no words of comfort came to mind. "I can write a letter for you," I said instead. "The hospital has a financial assistance program. It won't cover everything, but it might reduce the cost a little. Also, you should have his company look into a workers' compensation claim." "Workers' comp?" She looked confused. But he was driving home from a client dinner. "It depends on how their company defines it," I said. "Some consider off-site client entertainment as part of work hours. If you don't even ask, you're letting them off the hook." Chloe looked down at the crumpled receipts. "Could you write that letter for me?" she asked. "I can," I nodded. "But I will only state the facts of his medical condition and the high cost of treatment. I'm not going to write a sob story begging for charity." She let out a small laugh, then quickly covered her mouth. "I know," she said. "You've never been one to beg. There's not much worth begging for," I countered. "What about me?" she asked suddenly. The question hung in the air. "Are you asking if you're worth me begging for?" I said slowly. "No." She waved her hand dismissively. "Just a random thought. Writing these letters is part of my job," I said flatly. "It has nothing to do with you being Chloe Vance. You just happen to be the family member of a patient who qualifies." She gave me a wry smile. "You're still such a jerk. Do I owe you money?" I retorted. "We can talk about that after you give me a discount on his ICU bill." She took a deep breath, as if trying to use humor as a shield. I'll write the letter tonight, I said. I'll submit it to the administration office tomorrow morning. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you should talk to one of the hospital's social workers. Tell them you just need some breathing room, not a lifelong handout. She listened quietly and then nodded. Okay. Chloe, hurry up, her mother-in-law called from down the hall. The nurse said they need to draw his blood soon. See if we need to sign anything. Chloe called back that she was coming, gave me a nod, and turned to leave. After a few steps, she looked back. Ethan, yes. You said you would only write the facts, no begging, she said. But could you add one more sentence for me? What is it? Just right. The patient's wife is still present and has not given up. She smiled, a tight, forced expression. That way, at least I have a place in the narrative. You're turning a financial aid application into a suicide note, I said coldly. She didn't argue. She just gave a small wave and walked quickly down the hall. At that moment, I realized something. Chloe wasn't just paying for a respectable life. She was paying for the right to postpone her own breakdown. Later that night, during my rounds, I found Mark Peterson had been moved from the ICU to a transitional care room. He was propped up in bed, an oxygen tube in his nose, scrolling through his phone. A message was on the screen from a woman with heavy makeup. Don't worry about the project. I'm holding down the fort. It was followed by a flexing bicep emoji. I knocked and entered. He reflexively hid his phone under his pillow. Dr. Cole, he said, his voice still a little breathless. Thank you for everything. If you're so thankful, maybe you'll think twice before drinking and driving again, I said, not mincing words. It was a moment of weakness, he said with an embarrassed laugh. The client was insistent. He said if we landed this project, the bonus would be huge. With things being tight at home, I just wasn't thinking clearly. You weren't thinking clearly about how cheap you value your life, I corrected him. He fell silent. Beside the bed was a lavishly wrapped fruit basket with a card that read, "To a successful partnership." It was clearly from his colleagues. Where's your wife? I asked. She went home, he said. She can't take too much time off from her school. My mom told me she was running around the hospital all day. His tone wasn't grateful, just matter of fact. Did you know that when you were in the ICU, her card was declined at the billing office? I asked, looking at him. She used the money she had saved for your son's school to cover your deposit. Mark paused. She mentioned she had to use some of our savings, he said. It's all for the family. You know how it is in this city, Dr. Cole. If you don't have money, you can't even afford to get sick. If I lose this project, our mortgage, the car payments, our son's tuition, it all goes sideways. Have you ever thought that if you had died on that road, those things wouldn't have just gone sideways? They would have collapsed directly on top of her, I said coldly. If you were dead, that bonus wouldn't do you any good. He was quiet for a full minute. I didn't want to die, he muttered. Who wants to die? Then why was the project the first thing you asked about? When I woke up, all I could remember was my manager telling me, if you don't land this deal, you're out at the end of the year, he said with a bitter smile. That's the first thing that came to my mind. It's not that I didn't think of my wife. I just assumed she would be there. So you took her for granted. I finished for him. You worry about the project. She worries about you. A very clear division of labor. He was speechless. Dr. Cole, he said after a moment. Do you know my wife? What? I looked at him. Are you afraid I'm taking her side? No, he waved his hands. It's just, you seem to know a lot about her. Did she say something to you? She didn't have to, I said. I saw her at the billing window, scraping together everything she had. As for what she's thinking, I wouldn't know. I had a job for a psychiatrist. I checked his chart. We'll change your dressing tomorrow. If you're stable, you can try getting out of bed the day after. If you recover well, you could be discharged in 2 or 3 weeks. Whether your project will still be there is beyond my control. I turned to leave. Dr. Cole, he called out. Yes. These past few days. Has she cried a lot? I paused. Why do you ask? My mom said she's been very calm at the hospital, he said, licking his dry lips. It makes me feel guilty. You want her to cry? I asked. No, he shook his head quickly. It's just, when she doesn't say anything, when she just handles everything on her own, it feels worse. It feels like I owe her more and more, and I'll have to spend the rest of my life paying it back. That at least showed a glimmer of self-awareness. You still don't even understand who you owe your life to, I said flatly. If you really want to pay her back, stop talking about the damn project and start asking her if she's tired. The cost is the same, but the effect is different. He didn't say anything else. As I left the room, I saw Chloe at the end of the hall, leaning against a window, talking on the phone. Her voice was fragmented by the drafts in the corridor. I could only catch a few phrases. Mom, he's fine. You just need to stay a few more days. I'll figure out the money. You and Dad just take care of yourselves. Don't worry. A pause, then quieter. I'm okay. I can handle it. Her hand was pressed against the windowsill, her knuckles white, as if anchoring herself in place. At that moment, I realized that we surgeons who stitch people back together think we hold life and death in our hands. But what truly determines how a person lives is often not the surgery itself, but the people outside the or at the billing window on the other end of a phone call, who quietly carry the weight of their future. And Chloe was being forced to learn how to measure her marriage in installments, like a life sentence she had given herself. 7 before he was discharged, he told his female colleague, "You're so much more understanding than my wife." The day of his discharge evaluation, I overheard Mark Peterson say it himself, "You're so much more understanding than my wife." He was talking to a female colleague. His sutures had just been removed, and the incision scar was healing cleanly. I was at the nurse's station, less than 30 feet from his room, the door of which was slightly ajar. The words drifted out into the hallway like two thin, sharp blades, nicking everyone within earshot, including Chloe, who was standing at the other end of the hall, holding a thermos. It started that morning. His pre-discharge checkup included the standard blood work, urinalysis, and an ultrasound. When I did my rounds at 8 a.m., Mark was already sitting up in bed, scrolling through his phone. The nasal cannula was gone, and he looked much healthier. "We'll do the follow-up test today," I said, flipping through his chart. "If everything looks good, the rest is just about post-op recovery." Dr. Cole, when can I go back to work? That was his first question. Still, at least you're asking a slightly more sensible question than when you first woke up, I said. But the answer is the same. No heavy lifting, prolonged sitting, or late nights for at least 3 months. If you treat your body like a factory part, you can just slot back into the machine. You'll be back here for major repairs in no time. But the project, he frowned. My manager just texted me. The client is getting impatient. You can text him back while lying down, I said flatly. Your hands still work, don't they? He had no response. During your recovery, I continued, making notes in his chart. You'll be easily fatigued, your immune system will be weak, and you'll likely experience mood swings. If you insist on pulling all-nighters for this project, the next time you're admitted, I'll consider tattooing "no trespassing" on your abdomen. Mark managed a weak smile, clearly not taking it as a joke. Chloe stood quietly at the foot of the bed. When I mentioned prolonged sitting, I saw her instinctively glance at his abdomen, a flicker of genuine concern in her eyes. Dr. Cole, will he need regular follow-up appointments? Chloe asked. 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, in 1 year, I replied. Don't skip any of them. I'll write down a schedule for you. Okay, Chloe said, typing the dates into her phone's calendar and then muttering them to herself, like a student memorizing facts for an exam. His mother sat nearby, half watching cooking videos on her phone. Don't you worry, doctor, she chimed in. When he gets home, I'll make him soup every day. He'll be back in shape in no time. If he gets too in shape, he'll develop a fatty liver, I said. He will, she asked, startled. Moderation is key. I clarified. This is recovery, not fattening a pig for market. After my rounds, I spent the morning in the clinic. When I returned in the afternoon, the ward was filled with the scent of cheap perfume, the unmistakable sign of a colleague visit. A group of them, carrying fruit baskets and a bouquet of wilting flowers, were crowded into Mark's room. Leading the group was a stylishly dressed woman, the same one from his text messages. Her makeup was even heavier in person, her lipstick the same shade as the in-surgery light outside the OR. Mark, you really scared us this time, she exclaimed as she entered. 1 minute you're in the group chat talking about the proposal, the next you're in a car wreck. Everyone at the office is saying you're a true martyr for the project. The man behind her chuckled. Mark smiled, a tired but pleased expression on his face. It was nothing. I got lucky. It's not nothing, the woman said, placing her fruit basket on the bedside table and leaning in closer. That project would have fallen apart without you. My manager has been breathing down my neck ever since. I've been taking all the heat. When she said the project would have fallen apart without you, her eyes weren't on the fruit basket. They were on him. Chloe stood at the foot of the bed, placing a bowl of soup on the small table. Steam rose from the bowl, catching the cold, white light of the room. The colleague's eyes swept over to the soup. "Chloe, you must be exhausted," she said politely. "You probably haven't slept at all." "I'm fine," Chloe said, her expression neutral, "as long as he's awake." "Well, he needs to be awake to get back to work," the woman chirped. A workhorse like Mark, I bet his first thought in the ICU was, "Did we submit the proposal?" She laughed, a sound laced with a kind of proprietary pride. From a nurse's station, I saw Chloe's expression. It wasn't surprise or anger. It was the look of someone who had known the answer all along and was just waiting for someone else to say it out loud. "You know, you're right. That's exactly what I asked," Mark said, a hint of pride in his own voice. "I think I even shocked Dr. Cole. That just shows how dedicated you are," the woman gushed. Who else wakes up from a car accident and immediately thinks about work? Anyone else would be milking it for all it's worth. The group laughed again. The only one not laughing was Chloe. She was slowly wiping down the outside of the thermos with a paper towel, her movements deliberate and gentle, as if she were polishing something far more valuable than a soup container. The colleague, Tiffany, took a seat by the bed. "Don't worry, Chloe," she said, her tone a mix of casualness and condescension. "We'll all pitch in a cover for Mark at the office. Once he's fully recovered, he can come back and be the star player again. The company will take care of him." "It was so scary that night," she continued, recounting the events with a startling level of detail, which client it was, which restaurant, what they drank, who insisted on driving. It was as if she had witnessed the whole thing. Chloe looked up, her gaze lingering on Tiffany's face for a moment. "You were there?" she asked. "Of course," Tiffany said. "Who else was going to get his laptop out of the trunk? It was a miracle the car didn't explode." She said miracle with a kind of vicarious thrill. "Oh," Chloe said. "Well, thank you for getting his things." "It was more than just getting his things," Tiffany laughed. "I was the one running around the ER. You hadn't gotten there yet, had you?" She feigned a moment of realization. "Oh, that's right, the doctor said his emergency contact wasn't picking up, so I gave the nurse your number. See, Mark, I'm practically family." The room fell silent for a beat. Then one of the men joked, "That depends on whether Chloe agrees." Mark just smiled, not denying it. Chloe's fingers twisted the paper towel into a thin, white cord. "Chloe, what were you doing at the time?" Mark suddenly asked. "I was making soup for our son," she replied calmly. "My phone was in the living room. By the time I heard it ring, it was the third time they had called." "Well, that explains it," Tiffany jumped in. "I was in such a panic, I just started taking notes for him. If his workers' comp claim goes through, the company will probably thank me for being so quick on my feet." She shot him a pointed look. It was a look I recognized, the kind you see in hospitals, but usually directed at a senior doctor, not a colleague. "I need to make a phone call," Chloe said abruptly. She stood up, phone in hand. "You all can chat. The soup's still hot." She walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. Tiffany watched her go, then lowered her voice. "Your wife has such a good temper. Anyone else would have lost it with me by now." "You shouldn't say things like that," Mark said, but there was no reprimand in his tone. "I already told you, you're so much more understanding than my wife," Tiffany laughed. "If she were on our team, we'd be fighting all the time. Your wife is perfect for being at home, taking care of your son." "She couldn't handle the pressure at the office," Tiffany continued. "You're the one who has to be out here, fighting the battles. We get it. If you need a vent, you can come to the office and complain about the boss. Just let your wife keep thinking that you're busy with work." The laughter started again. This time, I didn't wait to hear more. I walked over and knocked firmly on the door before pushing it open. "Dr. Cole," the colleague said, their voices immediately quieting. "Sorry to interrupt your visit," I said, looking at my watch. "But visiting hours are limited. This is a transitional care unit, not your company's break room." Of course," one of the men said. "We were just leaving. No need to thank me for my hard work," I said coldly. "Just be sure to mention to your manager that the first word out of his mouth when he woke up was project. It should at least earn him a line about company loyalty in his performance review." My tone was not friendly. The colleagues exchanged awkward glances. Tiffany, however, was quick to recover. Of course, a guy like Mark is an asset anywhere. The company will definitely reward him. Let's hope your company starts rewarding its employees' lives with the same enthusiasm, I added, then turned my attention to the patient. You have one more test this afternoon. After that, we'll set a discharge date. Don't get too excited right now. If your heart rate spikes, you'll be the one paying for it tonight. Understood, Mark said quickly. I turned and left. As I stepped out, I saw a shadow behind the door. Chloe was leaning against the wall, her phone clutched in her hand, the screen dark. She hadn't made the call. Ethan, she said softly. I'd stopped counting. You heard that, didn't you? She asked. Heard what? I countered. The part where he said I'm perfect for being at home, or the part where he said I'm not as understanding as her. If I said I didn't hear it, that wouldn't be very understanding of me, I replied. She let out a small, tired laugh. Ethan, she said, looking down at her hands. I realized something. I always thought understanding was a compliment. Now I know that for some people, it just means obedient. Obedient to the boss, to the project, to their idea of what a good wife should be. You heard them, I said. They complimented you too. Said you had a good temper, that you were a good caretaker. You're the stable foundation in their little play. They're the ones on stage. It's a form of acknowledgement, I guess, Chloe shrugged. Just not a very valuable one. She looked up at the room number on the door, as if it were the case number for her own trial. Ethan, she asked suddenly, if it were you, would you let your partner live like this? Like what? You go in his surgery, and she just waits in the hallway, Chloe said. Waits for you to finish, waits for you to have time, waits for you to get paid, waits for you to finally notice why she's sitting alone in the living room in the middle of the night. And every time you just say, sorry, I've been so busy. I was silent for a moment. I used to think so, I said. When I was younger, I thought having someone wait for you was a blessing. Now, I would only ask someone to wait for one thing. What's that? For me to get off work so we can have dinner together, I said. Nothing else. I'm afraid that if someone waits too long, they'll get used to it. So used to it that one day, they won't even have the energy to leave. Chloe smiled, a sad, knowing expression. It's a little late for you to be saying that now, she said. You're not my boyfriend anymore. Good thing, I said. Otherwise, I'd have to schedule another surgery today, just to relieve the pressure of my own guilt. She nodded slowly. Ethan, yes. If one day, she said, staring out the window at the end of the hall, if one day I stopped being so understanding, would you find that strange? No, I said. I'd find it normal. Everyone deserves to live for themselves at some point. Living for others for too long is bad for your health. What kind of illness is that? She asked. Chronic depletion, I said. She smiled, a more genuine smile this time. Dr. Cole, are you diagnosing me? I'm not a psychiatrist, I said. I'm just advising you not to let it become terminal. She nodded. Then I'll start with something small. Like what? The social worker came to see me, she said. She said that if his medical expenses are too high, we could apply for financial aid by adjusting some of our family assets. I need to provide some documents. The house deed, income statements, that sort of thing. When she said, house deed, her expression shifted slightly. I've never even seen it before. Today I'm going to ask to see it. She looked toward the hospital room. His understanding wife is about to learn how to do one thing. What's that? Find out if I even have a name in this marriage. Whether it's on the deed, or just in his list of emergency contacts. With that, she tightened her grip on her phone, turned, and pushed the door open, stepping back inside. The soft click of the closing door was barely audible in the quiet hallway. It was as if nothing had happened, but I knew that once a crack appears, it never fully heals. That night, in the progress notes, I wrote, patient's vitals are stable, recovery is progressing well. My pen hovered over the page. I was tempted to add another line. Patient's wife's level of understanding is decreasing. This is a positive development, but that wasn't a medical diagnosis. So I left it in my head. At his follow-up appointment, she placed a copy of the deed in front of me and said, this time, it's my turn to save myself. Mark Peterson's first follow-up was 30 days after his discharge. My clinic opened at 8. He strolled in at 8:30. His winter coat was unbuttoned over a dress shirt. No scarf, but his slacks were sharply pressed. Someone was clearly still maintaining the facade of his respectable life. He came alone. No Chloe, no in-laws. Dr. Cole, he said, sitting down. The scar feels a little tight sometimes. Is that normal? It's normal, I said, pulling on a pair of gloves. For someone with your lifestyle, consider it a friendly reminder. I had him lie back and examine the incision. The scar was still pink and slightly raised, but healing well. Any heavy lifting, prolonged sitting, or late nights recently? I asked. A little, he admitted. Things are busy with a project. Every time you say the word project, I get the urge to add a warning label to your abdomen, I said dryly. Luckily for you, I have self-control. He gave an awkward laugh. Dr. Cole, he hesitated. Do you think cheated death? If you still have a nerve to drink and drive, then you're not treating it like a life you got back, I said. The fact that you're asking means you're at least a little scared. So maybe there's hope for you yet. He fell silent. I wrote up his follow-up notes. Recovery good. Continue to rest. Avoid strenuous activity. Standard procedure. Where's your wife? I asked as I signed the chart. She has classes today, he said quickly. It was hard enough for her to get so much time off already. He paused, then added, she's been really busy lately. Busy with what? Running around to the bank, the community office, legal aid, he said, scratching his head. She said she wants to get our affairs in order. I don't get what's going on in her head. The phrase was casual, a mix of complaint and guilt. But I understood immediately. Getting affairs in order wasn't about tidying the house. It was about auditing the books, clarifying responsibilities, and taking stock of their marriage. Has she told you what she's found? I asked. A little, he said, avoiding my gaze. She asked me about the house a few days ago. Said she wanted to see the deed. Did you show it to her? I did, he sighed. I was hoping to put it off, but she went and made 2 copies. Kept one for herself. Said it might be useful later. It sounds like she's just doing what any responsible adult would do, I said. What are you so nervous about? Dr. Cole, he lowered his voice. She also made a suggestion. What was it? She asked me if we should add her name to the deed. The clinic room was quiet for a moment. What did you say? I asked. I told her the mortgage isn't paid off yet, so adding a name is a huge hassle, he said with a dry laugh. And, my parents are old-fashioned. They believe the house should be in the man's name since it was bought before the marriage. Don't use your parents as an excuse. I cut him off. If you don't want to do it, just say so. Stop blaming other people. He looked offended. It's not that I don't want to give her security, he argued. I just don't think a marriage should depend on a piece of paper. Then what does it depend on? I countered. Waking up in the ICU and asking about a project bid? He was speechless. Take your medication and come to your next appointment, I said, closing his file. Next. He stood up, but hesitated. Dr. Cole, spit it out, I said, glancing at the line of patients outside. She's not really talking to me much these days, he said, looking down. But she still cooks my meals, takes care of our son. Everything as usual. My mom says she's just in a mood, but I feel like it's different. Your mother has her areas of expertise, I said. But understanding your wife is clearly not one of them. If you want to know what's different, go home and ask her. Don't refer her to me like she's one of my patients. He gave a sheepish smile and left. I saw a few more patients, pushing the conversation to the back of my mind. It wasn't until the end of the day that it came rushing back. The waiting room was nearly empty, the TV playing a hospital promo on a loop. I was about to shut down my computer when there was a soft knock on the door. Come in. The door opened a crack, and Chloe peeked in. She seemed surprised to see me still there. Do you have an appointment? I asked out of habit. I do, she said, holding up a slip. I got the last add-on slot. She was wearing a camel-colored coat, her hair pulled back simply. She wore no makeup, but her eyes were sharp and clear. She looked solid, like someone who had been pulled from a wreckage, dried off, and found her footing. What's wrong? I asked. A little tightness in the chest, she said, then smiled. Just kidding. I'm not here for a hospital bed. Then why are you here? I leaned back in my chair. To get your husband's test results? That's part of it, she said, sitting down. He texted me on his way out. Said you gave him another professional grade lecture. I was just doing my job. Well, I'm here today to ask you to help me with another job. She pulled a clear file folder from her bag. Inside was a stack of papers. On top was a photocopy of a house deed. The red stamp of the county clerk's office was clear. I saw it, she said, sliding the paper across my desk. Owner, Mark Peterson. Joint tenants, none. The words were stark. Why are you showing me this? I asked. To confirm my role in this family, she said. Legally none. In reality, a combination of nanny, cook, and co-signer. She smiled. Your bedside manner is as sharp as ever. You're the one who brought it up, I said. So, what's the diagnosis, doctor? She asked. She reached into the folder and pulled out another set of papers. Bank statements, pay stubs, transaction histories from her various accounts. This, she said, tapping the clipped stack, is every dollar I've transferred to the mortgage account for the past 5 years. Every penny I've spent from my own salary on our son's tuition, insurance, and clothes. If we ever get to that point, I want a judge to see this. She didn't say the word divorce, but she didn't have to. Are you asking me to be a witness? I asked. No, she shook her head. I'm here to have a surgeon I've known for 10 years confirm one simple fact. What's that? I'm not starting from nothing, she said, her eyes fixed on the papers. I at least know what I've contributed. I looked at her, silent. The Chloe I used to know would never have done this. The old Chloe was the type to be given a script and spend her life memorizing the lines. Now, she was rewriting it. It wasn't a dramatic, sudden change. It was slow, deliberate, steady. So, you came here just to show me this? I asked. Not entirely, she said. I've made 2 decisions I wanted to tell you about. Am I your life coach now? I raised an eyebrow. You can kick me out if you don't want to hear it, she said. I'll just consider it a paid consultation. Go on, I said, pushing my pen aside. First, she said, unlocking her phone and showing me the screen. It was the hospital's patient portal. I changed my emergency contacts. The name in the first slot was no longer her parents or me. It was her own. You listed yourself as your own emergency contact? I asked. Yes, she nodded. I realized that my first instinct has always been to think, who can I call? Now, I want to be the person who gets called. Even if someone else eventually needs to be notified, my name is going down first. So, I've been fired? I asked. Consider it a unilateral termination of our informal agreement, she said, her tone light. Don't worry, I never paid you anyway. And the second decision? The second. She carefully folded the copy of the deed and put it back in the folder. I'm not filing for divorce. Not yet. You're stalling? I'm not waiting for him to change, she said. I'm giving myself time. I need to figure out how I'm going to live, where the money will come from, what to do about our son, whether I need a new job, how to tell my parents. You once said that everyone deserves to live for themselves at some point, she continued. I've been doing the math. If there's any time left in my life for that, it starts now. It sounds like you're doing a pre-op assessment, I said. Except the surgery isn't on an abdomen, it's on a marriage. Which is why I came to see someone who's familiar with the procedure, she said. To make sure I don't bleed out. The only advice I can give you is not to cut any major arteries, I said, leaning back. Don't expect me to write you a prescription for preventing complications. She looked at me and suddenly smiled. Ethan, yes. Have you ever wondered if things would have been different if you had chased after me that night? She had asked me that question before, outside the ICU, her eyes red and her hands cold. Now, her eyes were clear, her voice steady. The question was the same, but the person asking it was different. I have, I said. She seemed surprised by my directness. And, she asked. It would have been different, I said. Maybe we would have argued over a different house deed with a different name on it. Or maybe you'd be standing outside a different hospital paying the deposit for a different man. The problem wasn't the person, Chloe. It was the script. An adult's misery is mostly copy-pasted. I continued. If you don't change the template, it doesn't matter who you cast as the lead. So, am I changing the template now? She asked. If you're really ready to stop being so understanding, then yes, I said. She smiled. And what about my other half? What do I do with that? Save it for your son, I said. He'll need it someday. She paused, a flicker of softness in her eyes. Ethan, she said, her fingers tracing the edge of the folder. I had another reason for coming here. I'm not going to ask you to save my marriage, she said. That's not your job. I just wanted you to know something. What? That day at the courthouse, when I said you couldn't give me the life I needed. I was wrong. It wasn't that you couldn't give it to me. It was that I didn't know what I really needed. She said it without shame or regret, like a final closing entry in a long-settled account. Do you know now? I asked. I'm starting to, she said. I need to know that if everything falls apart, I can still stand on my own 2 feet with my son and not just survive, but live. I need to know that the next time I'm in a hospital, I'm not the one at the billing window being rushed. I'm the one who can walk in and say, I have insurance. I have savings. I have this handled. That's not too much to ask, I said. For most people, it's just called being an adult, she said with a small smile. For me, it's called being reborn. She stood up and slung the bag over her shoulder. I have to go. Where? I asked. To class, she said. Today's topic is career day. I'm going to talk to my students about what work is and what a respectable life really means. What are you going to tell them? I asked. She had her back to me, her voice calm. I'm going to tell them that a respectable life isn't about the brand of your shoes or the neighborhood you live in. It's about knowing that when you're faced with a car wreck, a critical condition form, a mortgage, that your first thought isn't, I need someone to save me. It's being able to stand at the billing window and sign the papers without your hand shaking. She turned to look at me. Is that too realistic, Dr. Cole? It's perfect for a teacher, I said. Just don't convince them all to go to medical school. She laughed, a real, genuine laugh this time. Don't worry, I'm not that cruel. The next patient peeked in, then retreated. Chloe, I said, just as she was about to leave. She paused. The next time you have to sign something, I said, whether it's a medical form or anything else, read first. Ask yourself, is this fair to me? And if it's not, change it. Are you teaching me how to be a patient's family member or how to be an adult? She asked. Same thing, I said. Every signature in a hospital is just a rehearsal for life. She nodded. Ethan, yes. Thank you for saving him that night, she said. And thank you for not trying to save us. That wasn't my procedure to perform, I said. Saving him was my job. Saving yourself is yours. She didn't look back again. She just raised a hand in a small wave, just like she had all those years ago outside our apartment before she walked away into the rain. But this time, she wasn't dragging a suitcase, and there was no one waiting for her to look back. The clinic was silent. I sat for a moment, then turned back to my computer. In Mark Peterson's file, there was a blank field for notes. On an impulse, I typed, recommend family member increase financial and legal literacy, decrease understanding behavior. Then I deleted it. The system didn't need to see it. It was enough that I knew. That night, as I was leaving the hospital, the sky was dark and heavy, threatening rain. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Message from Northwood Elementary Parent Alert System. Ms. Vance's classroom theme of the day was, always leave yourself a way out. For questions, please contact the main office. I stared at the words, always leave yourself a way out, and smiled into the cold wind. Saving a life was my routine. Witnessing someone save her own, that was rare. With a car wreck, a stack of receipts, and a copy of a house deed, Chloe had just performed her own surgery. I wasn't a surgeon. I was just an observer, standing at the end of the hall, watching through the glass, making sure she didn't lose too much blood, and making sure that this time, she was no one's emergency contact but her own.